Welcome back to In Our Issues, a podcast where we learn what it's like to be in the shoes of people with mental health issues. My name is Nathan Donnelly, and this week, my co-hosts and I discuss boundaries, what their types are, how to keep them healthy, and how we enforce and experience them. I put my co-hosts outside their comfort zone with this one, you can definitely tell, but I am so proud of them for sticking to it to the end. I think we ended up getting a lot of great conversations out of this topic, for sure. Respecting and communicating about boundaries is important, especially for people who are living with mental health issues. And now, without further ado, here is the IOI crew.
Hey audience, welcome to In Our Issues. Today we're talking about boundaries and the importance and types and natures of them. It's going to be a fun episode. I'm really excited for this. How you guys feeling?
Every bit of this is against my will. I want you to know that I'm not here of my own volition. You'd think I would because it's my house, but I don't like this topic a bit.
Don't tell them where we are. It's top secret.
I didn't tell them my address is 1600 Pennsylvania.
Say yeah, blah, blah, blah. Don't do that.
That's the White House.
Your house is white. Anyway, point is, we're going to talk about boundaries today, and I'm here with two of my... What?
You go.
You said something about Google Maps.
Yeah, I'm just saying. You don't want people to know this is my house. You just told them what color it was. That narrows it down to like 8 houses, maybe.
8 houses?
Mm-hmm.
At least in Washington.
Exactly. Thank you, Amanda. I got you.
All right, guys.
You're the best. Okay.
I'm here with two of my
Washington
best friends.
State, y'all, not D.C.
I'm here with two of my best friends, Bill and Amanda, without whom this cannot be possible.
That's for sure. You guys wouldn't be in here without me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, this is going to be a good episode, I promise you.
Okay.
We're going to get real. We're going to talk about, first, guys, we're going to talk about the types of boundaries. Can we all agree that having healthy boundaries is important for mental health?
Yes.
I don't know what that's like, so I cannot confirm.
I didn't finish my sentence. Yes, that's what I hear, sir.
Well, that's perfect because we're actually going to do an activity here at the end of this one to help us understand.
You're gonna make me do paperwork on a podcast?
Time out. Does this end up with me in the fetal position at the bottom of the shower running on cold water?
Probably.
Okay,
that was me this morning.
Good.
That was me this morning, so that's gonna have to be.
I don't know. That's on the itinerary for next episode.
Oh, okay, great. You bring the shower.
I don't know what we're gonna do.
Cold water.
I don't know what we're gonna do now. You spoiled it. Anyway, jeez, Bill.
Holy shit, man! We were talking about different types of self-harm this morning and how far I've evolved.
Hey, we gotta focus.
Hang on 1 second. And okay, you're right. Go ahead.
Thank you. All right. Physical boundaries. One of the most important ones. If you're being beat up, that's a problem.
That's a little too close, please.
So the thing is, physical boundaries are just one of many types that we're about to go over. There's physical boundaries, intellectual boundaries, emotional boundaries, sexual boundaries, material boundaries, and time boundaries.
So you know what? Maybe physical boundaries are the first thing you learn, right? Because you're going to be held and stuff. I mean, from the time you're born, so that's just going to be your norm. But when you start to be able to move,
some of us were never held, Bill.
Okay, sorry, you're right. Some of you weren't. I'm sorry, for real. But as soon as you start to move, you realize that you cannot, in fact, go through that wall or through that piece of furniture, or that door has to be open. So,
object permanence, if you will.
You know what are really cool studies is where they'll have a glass floor so you can see through it, and then the floor has steps that go down 10 feet or so, and they put a baby on the floor and then push them towards that drop off to see if they'll go out.
And it's funny because developmentally, depending on their age, they will or they won't. The older they are, the less likely they are to go out on the, glass. But the younger that they are, they'll just no problem. They have no fears.
But you're right. But it's kind of a U curve too, because then you will, then you won't. And then you get old enough to where you understand that you're walking on glass, then you will again. You know what I mean?
And life is just about finding the balance of the glass. What's real and what's not in terms of your boundaries.
I suppose it is.
Sometimes you have to know when to erect the glass and when to break it down. Basically, I want to go over the different boundary types, and then we can go into a free-form discussion about this stuff. So physical boundaries, and I want you guys to follow along with us. You can pause us right now and go down to you can go down to the description, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is, YouTube. You can pause us now, go down, print out the PDF that I have a link there for. So, physical boundaries refer to personal space and physical touch. Healthy physical boundaries include an awareness of what's appropriate and what's not in various settings and types of relationships. Physical boundaries may be violated if someone touches you when you don't want them to, or when they invade your personal space. So, the next one is intellectual. I want us to think about, we talked a little bit about physical boundaries. I want us to think about the next one, intellectual boundaries. Refer to thoughts and ideas. Healthy intellectual boundaries include respect for others' ideas and an awareness of appropriate discussion. Should we talk about the weather or politics?
Oh, I thought you were going REM there. Saying, should we talk about the weather? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. Intellectual boundaries are violated when someone dismisses or belittles another person's thoughts or ideas. So, if you guys have experience with that, we're going to do a little exercise at the end of this that'll hopefully help you get an idea of what you can do about it. Emotional boundaries refer to a person's feelings.
Sorry.
Healthy emotional boundaries include limitations on what to share and what not to share. Personal information. What you got on your mind?
But it's just the fact that this is so foreign to me at 55 is crazy.
Hey, go ahead.
Really?
Yeah, man, I'm really interested to see where we get. 'Cause
Yeah.
I can use it.
Hell yeah. All right. Basically, for example, gradually sharing personal information during the development of a relationship, as opposed to revealing everything to everyone. Emotional boundaries are violated when someone criticizes, belittles, or invalidates another person's feelings.
Oh, somebody came to mind for that one.
All right, well, maybe they can be the one you focus on in the worksheet.
I know somebody will.
I'm not allowed to.
You're not allowed to? I give you permission.
No, she'd kill me, man. I'm just kidding.
Hey. We don't have to share the person that we do this about. It's going to be
Or
a
the
healthy
people.
exercise for us to
Right.
understand where our limitations are. You know what I'm saying?
Michelle, I'm looking at you.
Oh, I guess the Band-Aid's been ripped off.
It's
Sorry
okay.
about
We all
that.
knew what it was.
Jeez.
I love you guys. All right.
Everybody get tied up in their
least
backyard on the
somebody
4th of July.
Hey,
Yeah. Taylor Tomlinson.
sexual boundaries refer to the emotional, intellectual, and physical aspects of sexuality. Healthy sexual boundaries involve mutual understanding and respect of limitations and desires between sexual partners. Sexual boundaries can be violated with unwanted sexual touch, pressure to engage in sexual acts, leering, or sexual comments.
I think I'm pretty good on that one.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I think I'm really super conscious of it. I'm gonna try to be.
I hear
Man,
that.
you've been around me more than pretty much anybody the last few years. And I think I probably said to you early on, if I
Yeah.
ever say anything that seems inappropriate to you, stop me and tell me because it does not want
And
to
I
know.
have.
That's true. And that's really humiliating. I mean, really humiliating.
Yeah. Material boundaries refer to money and possessions. Healthy material boundaries involve setting limits on what you will share and with whom. For example, it may be appropriate to lend a car to a family member, but probably not to someone you met this morning.
Or you can lend it to your boyfriend and he wraps it around a tree.
Or your
Oh.
ex, friend person, and they could hit a bus. Take out a telephone pole and Bluetooth transformers and take power out to an entire neighborhood and total my car
Oh, so like last week.
for the second time. What?
Oh, okay. For the second time. For the second time. The second bus, the second power outage.
No, she
Again?
didn't go- No, she was learning in the first one and she perfected it in the second one.
Oh, okay. I see. It's training. It's training
Yeah,
for
for some reason.
for the next material boundary breach.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
kryptonite. She's my kryptonite. Oh, you know what?
for example, it may be appropriate. What? Go ahead.
I will get there. Sorry.
All
Are
right.
there more? Because so far I'm not feeling good.
There's one more. There's one more.
Shit, only okay.
There's one more.
I'm crossing my fingers. Come on. No whammy.
I love you guys. I don't want to kill you.
What
If
is
this is too hard, we can stop.
No, I need to win here.
Okay. Time boundaries refer to how a person uses their time. To have healthy time boundaries.
Okay, yo.
This is something I'm working on.
Ew, universe is looking at Amanda right now. Shit.
Refer to how a person uses their time. To have healthy time boundaries, a person must set aside enough time for each facet of their life, such as work, relationships, and hobbies.
Bro, full stop. Okay.
Full stop.
Never occurred
There's
to
one
me.
more sentence.
Hang on. Okay, finish that sentence.
Time boundaries are violated when another person demands too much of another's time.
Okay,
Oh,
this never
damn.
occurred to me in this discussion, but you can have multiple boundaries intersecting, like on those diagrams with the circles, you know?
Mm-hmm. Like
I'm
a Venn
thinking-
diagram, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of Amanda, like at work sometimes, maybe your boundaries of time are being violated,
Constantly.
right? While at the same time,
My boundaries of material and space are being
Exactly.
violated. And honestly,
Yep.
emotions.
yeah.
Yep. It can all get really complicated. There's a lot of stuff intertwined when you've been dealing with a lot of trauma. And to any of my listeners, if any of this stuff is triggering to you, feel free to pause and come back if you want to. Come back if you want to, or
Okay, cool.
if you don't, you know what I'm saying? Okay, these are. Guys, you're a part of this, though. I need you. Let's see. So
That's my
that's
problem.
all. So
I'm too
I just
needed.
wanted to define those boundaries. So now it's freeform discussion
Mine's
time,
really
guys.
close, but it doesn't have the ED at the end.
Now it's freeform discussion time. Where do we want to start? Who's got a story?
Well, it's not a free-form discussion if we have to find a place to start.
Right.
Well, it's not a freeform discussion.
I'm just fucking with you.
It's not a discussion at all if we don't find a place to start.
Hey, that's facts. That's facts.
Hey, y'all. How about you take a deep breath with me? Because this topic ain't easy. Ready? In. Out. And now, the freeform discussion.
Well, then we can think of our.
You know, one fucking thing about boundaries is really horrible is you really have a hard time redrawing boundaries
Oh my God, it's the most difficult thing.
once you've drawn them. And
I hear you.
you don't draw them overtly all the time. You're drawing them tacitly by what you say and do and think with regard to this person or this
Yeah.
situation.
And
And
unfortunately,
they're interpreting that in their own way. And so they're creating their own boundary for you.
but boundaries aren't, and this is something that I want to be very specific and say, because this was something that was instrumental for my healing, is that boundaries are not to change another person's behavior. It is to change what you tolerate
Exactly.
from other people.
Yeah.
So instead of
It's
saying
the-
like,
yeah.
you need to knock on my door before you walk in, instead of something like that, say, I will not help you unless you knock before you come into my office. So that way you're changing what you tolerate and not asking another person to change their behavior. You're simply saying, do what you want, but I'm not going to listen to you unless you knock on my door first,
Yeah.
instead of just barging right in
Yeah,
my
and that could be a
office.
metaphor for anything. Or it
Yeah.
could be as simple as, I'll take your shit up to this point and then I'm done.
I think that's a great example, Amanda. There's a really good reason for you, if you're the type of person that can get distracted easily, like me. Setting up a boundary like, I don't want to be disturbed unless you do it in a way that's comfortable with me.
Yeah, period.
That is 100% a great example.
Because I can't tell you how many times that happens to me at work. It's like I'll be in the middle of my zone. You know when you get in that flow state and
Absolutely.
you're just like
It's like
going,
my favorite state.
and then someone will literally knock on my door, and then because most of the staff there have master keys, they'll just come right in. They'll open up the door and come right in. A lot of times it's an emergency and they need to, and it's not a big deal. But there are some times when it is kind of annoying.
No, I can imagine that.
We can come back to this off camera or microphone, but I had a conversation about that very thing this morning.
Yeah.
I just almost poked my eye out with this thing. You
I
guys
saw that.
Careful.
That was badass. I'm scared now.
You said badass.
I did. What if I was a pirate? Okay,
anyway.
this is a question. This is a real question. So, close either eye. Do you see your nose out of your peripheral vision?
Yes.
I can't see out of this eye, so
Okay,
no.
close your other one, goofball.
Yeah.
Okay, now open both your eyes. You don't see your nose at all.
Yep.
In fact, your eyes are seeing your nose all the time. Your brain learns to block it out. So I'm wondering if you're a pirate and you lose an eye, and I'm sorry you didn't lose yours, so you would be able to tell me.
Yeah.
I'm not sorry you didn't lose yours, but you know what I mean.
It'd just be stuck in your vision at all times.
But would it start to fade away
Would you get used
over
to it?
months? Or would your brain just take it away one day, like my smell went away when I had the COVID?
That's a good question.
Yeah, pretty cool. It fascinates me that your brain literally just erases it. Yeah, I've seen that. It's not going to do a fucking thing. Erase it.
That is fascinating.
And you know
Like
what?
most people with the sign on my door.
Exactly. And like I do in relationships where I look right at the bad stuff and ignore it. Why?
I think that's a difficult thing too with like boundaries, especially when you're establishing the beginning of a relationship, because you're learning about the person and you're, trying to see the good in them. And so oftentimes you overlook or you maybe put in a little bit more effort where you normally wouldn't, or you go to bat for them a little bit more than you would normally.
You're saying you let things slide?
Yeah. Okay. So like you let them overstep your boundaries in the beginning a little bit more than you normally would if the relationship had been already curated and uplifted. And then it's working back. And then you have to unfortunately work backwards.
Work a little backwards.
Yeah, because those boundaries have already been completely stepped over, so that other person gets used to the boundary violations.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of work backwards, which is really difficult when something has already been pre-established.
So that's important because are we
going to talk about
the person if you bring up those things saying, I actually feel more comfortable if you don't do this as often, even if that happens frequently to you. Yeah. And even if this particular thing happens frequently in a relationship, but you're not okay with it, and you're okay with it, just like you're saying, you're okay with it at first, but you realize you're not okay with it later on, communicating with your partner or whoever it is that you have this relationship with, not necessarily a romantic relationship.
It could be parents, friends.
It's important that that they understand that this is just something that makes you feel comfortable. And if they continue to do it if they continue to do it even when you ask them not to, that's a bad sign. Yeah. It means that they're not respecting you in a way that is important.
Well, hell yeah, that's what it means. Everyone knows that. The problem is, what the hell do you do about it? Or do you stand up for yourself?
You communicate with them, and if they overstep their boundaries, then you need to start to enforce them.
I think it's
more forcefully.
I think it's also important too to put into perspective what exactly a boundary is and what you are allowed, like what boundaries you are within your right to set. Like what is a boundary? Like we talk about rigid and fluid and all of those kind of boundaries. I don't remember the specific language, but I know it's on the sheet.
Yeah, those are the boundary. Those are the boundary natures that we can get into.
So, like, it's important to put into perspective what actually is a boundary and what's being controlling, because I think some people get the wires crossed on those two things. Like, they'll go and they'll set a boundary and they'll say, well, I don't want to be friends with you if you're dating him. That's not setting a boundary. That's controlling and manipulation. You can say, I will not tolerate you talking about your boyfriend to me because I can't handle it anymore. Mm-hmm. And then if the other individual starts talking about their boyfriend to the person that set the boundary, that person is within their right to say, I don't want to talk about this, click, hang up the phone or walk away or whatever.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I can do that. I've done that several times. when I needed to.
Porous is the word I was looking for.
Yes.
Rigid and porous boundaries.
I'm actually going to branch into this.
Cool.
So
Run,
we got
Forrest,
rigid
run.
boundaries, porous boundaries, and healthy boundaries. Rigid boundaries is where you avoid intimacy and close relationships and you're unlikely to ask for help. Very protective of personal information, may seem detached even with romantic partners.
What's that called? What are we reading?
This is rigid. So there are three boundary
got you.
natures.
Okay,
There are three boundary natures that we're going over. There's rigid boundaries, porous boundaries, and healthy boundaries.
I'm more porous myself.
Whoa.
Well, so rigid boundaries, they have few close. They often have few people that have rigid boundaries often have few close relationships. They may seem detached. They're very personal. They're very protective of personal information. May avoid intimacy and stuff. Someone with porous boundaries tend to overshare personal information. They have difficulty saying no to the requests of others. I know I have trouble with that. I don't want someone to be uncomfortable, and I also, I feel the need to please other people and make sure they're happy, to an unhealthy degree. And I have a bit of a porous boundary with that. Involvement. You can also be over involved with other people's problems. Basically, a porous boundary is just it's not really there. You just let people make you uncomfortable by involving you in things that you're not comfortable with. Things like that. They're accepting of abuse and disrespect and dependent on opinions of others. I know that I have issues with that as well. Fear, and they also fear rejection if they do not comply with other people. Those are people with porous boundaries.
Wait, you say that you fear rejection if you don't comply with other people?
Yep.
Doesn't everybody do that?
No.
Well, yeah, kind of.
Not everybody.
I think it's a very human thing to experience this from time to time. I think that everybody's got experience with people that have rigid and porous boundaries, and you probably have a bit of both yourself. But the idea is to get to a healthy boundary, which is where you value your own opinions. You don't compromise values for others. You share personal information in appropriate ways, and you don't have to over or undershare.
You gotta stop, dude. So I'm wondering if appropriate boundaries are more like the Sasquatch or the Loch Ness Monster. Like every once in a while you get a picture of it.
Well, I think boundaries, like healthy boundaries, are oftentimes established in, development. Like oftentimes your caretakers are the ones who teach you and show you what these boundaries look like and what they are. And then you learn from going to school and developing, friendships and close relationships. And I think that your parents are kind of the precedent for what your boundaries look like.
Well, let me ask you, is that from shit you've read or is that just what you think?
Shit that I've read, yes.
Okay, cool.
And
so just so you know, you're like one of the smartest people about all this stuff that I know.
Yeah,
'Cause you do an
I second that.
exhaustive amount of research.
yeah.
She's a genius.
I actually read a book, and I'll have to get the specific name so that you can link it in the description, but it is a boundary. It's How to Set Boundaries workbook. And it literally walks you through what is porous, what is rigid. It gives you a little test to take on, which one that you identify with more and like where these boundaries come from. So like I am a child of enmeshment where boundaries were completely porous between the relationships between me,
I have
my
experience
parents,
with that as well,
and my brother. And so that led me to then, as an adult, still having those very porous boundaries and not knowing what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. Because when I would vocalize a need or try to set a boundary with my caretakers, it would be constantly stepped on or overlooked or just completely ignored.
Yeah.
And so therefore I learned to internalize my needs, and I realized that
Yep.
the needs of every person around me were more important to the stability of the dynamic of the home. So in order to keep
Yeah.
everyone else stable, I had to bury my emotions, bury
Yeah.
my needs, and make sure everybody else was okay. Because if I were to speak my needs or speak up for myself, that it was like World War in my house.
I hear you.
So then
and
that
feel
leads to having very porous boundaries as an adult, which is something I'm currently trying to work through. In that, when I try to, vocalize or set this boundary, I hit this wall because I then become so triggered from my experiences in childhood that there's all of these childlike emotions that come back up for me when I get into those situations where my body tells me, you need to set this boundary. You need to stick up for yourself. You're not comfortable. You're not okay.
And then you get so aggressive about it.
Well, then another part of my brain is like, you can't do this because if you do this, you'll either get in trouble, you're going to get yelled at, the rest of your day is going to be fucked up. Like there's all of these other factors that play into why it's so difficult to set that boundary, that at the end of the day, for me specifically, it's easier just to not set the boundary than go through the internal struggle of then trying to set the boundary.
Really? Wait, you mean even if you set it, like if you were the genie boundary setter and you set it the first time, that's still harder for you?
Yeah. If I were to if I were to set the boundary and it would even be like well recepted, there would still be that physical and emotional reaction that I experience that they don't like me. They're going to come behind my back and stab me in the back and like all these things.
Okay, I'm sorry that that's your go-to. I am, because that sucks. That's kind of on you, right?
Well, it's technically on my caretakers, but yeah, it's on me too.
I mean, at this point, when you're dealing with like
When it comes to asserting herself and dealing with the trauma and the situations that have been set upon her, I guess to an extent, it's up to her, up to me in a lot of, because I really relate to this, to assert yourself to a degree that's healthy for your personal development. You know what I mean?
And like for me, it's difficult because I am such an avid, and this is, due to my porous boundaries. And my upbringing is that I am such an avid, hyper vigilant individual who is constantly, earmarking other people's behavior constantly. So I will know just based on pure body language when I'm overstepping somebody's boundary, and I will, walk back or I will adjust my behavior.
You've pointed out stuff to me about people in the room with us.
Yeah. And so I think that sometimes I expect everybody else to have that kind of like superpower, I call it. Sorry.
That's a good comment.
And, but like sometimes they don't. And I feel a sense of like hurt because other people don't realize when to me, it's clearly they're overstepping my boundary. Like I'm clearly physically uncomfortable.
Okay.
I'm clearly shutting down because I can't vocalize what I'm feeling. I'm clearly in this state of like freeze response. And this individual isn't seeing that or, whatever, which I know a lot of times that's not the case. They could just be completely unaware, which oftentimes is the case. But, there's that internal battle when you're dealing with boundaries that, these people, i.e. your caretakers, my caretakers when I was young, are supposed to know my needs, are supposed to meet my needs, and they're not meeting my needs in these moments. And all of those things are rehashed when as an adult, I go into these situations where I have to set boundaries.
Yeah, sure.
So a lot of times it's so much deeper than just being able to set a boundary.
Yeah. And, also just asserting your needs when they've been neglected and
punished, truthfully.
Yeah, to be honest, I hear that. What were you going to say, Bill?
I was going to ask if we were talking about professionally or socially.
Anything.
What you were referring
what she's...
Everything, every aspect of a boundary.
Okay, so let's go to the work ones because we happen to work together. I have a problem with, so I have this desk and I have in a corner, basically, with a desk coming out of the wall. So I can put myself in this rectangle that only has one opening. Right?
Yeah.
And so people will come in my office to talk to me, and there are a few who will come and stand right at that opening.
Yeah, that's a physical boundary.
Yeah, and I've got 2 chairs on the other side of my desk and a pretty big office. That you can stand anywhere and you can come and lay down and people do that and talk, but don't come and stand, a foot away from me. And so what I had to do, and this was hard for me, was say, hey, you're way up in my personal space. Go on your own side.
Yeah.
Exactly like that. And you know what? That's what worked. Nothing else worked. I would try to get up and walk, and like lead them to a different part of my office and then say, oh, well, I remember I don't need that. And then go and sit down. And then it would come and block me in again. So and I find that easy to do now for some reason.
Well, because you practice. It's all about practice and building that boundary setting muscle.
That's true.
Practice asserting yourself.
And I think it's important. And that's why this workbook that I did is really great, because it literally teaches you how to set boundaries like within a sentence structure. Like it gives you a sentence you can say to somebody based on what boundary you're specifically struggling with. So it gives you like a really good guide map, which is great for me because when I get into those situations, I completely shut down.
Yeah.
And my brain does not work properly.
Yeah. Just as an aside, you and I have talked about this several times. Role playing sucks ass and it's embarrassing, but it's really fucking effective.
Yeah, it is effective. Absolutely.
And it goes with conversations. And I do this, decision tree in my head. I'm going to say this, and he or she's going to say that or that.
Exactly.
And what's going to happen then?
Word. I do it in the mirror a lot where I rehearse what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I'll do that.
I will literally daydream scenarios in which I'm standing up for myself. Like that's how difficult it is for me. Like I will literally dissociate and like have these scenarios in my brain where I am this like super confident, assertive, boundary setting person, like this idealistic version of myself. And I'll like play out these things in my brain. And then when it comes down to the moment, I have these things mapped out in my head. And then the moment comes and all of that is just completely gone.
How many seasons?
The things, and it's just
15,
anxiety.
probably?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Dude, and I hear you on that. It's when you get that's why it's important. That's why it's important to find ways to
hang on, time out.
Maintain. Wait. Let me finish. Let me finish this thought.
Go ahead. Okay.
Let me maintain. It's important for you to maintain your composure when you're trying to assert yourself with somebody who won't let your needs be met for some reason, and that takes practice and it takes courage. And whether you're writing it down in a journal, rehearsing it in a mirror, daydreaming it, it's important to find a way that works for you so that in the moment you don't shut down. It's hard to do.
Okay, so for real, going back to what you were saying about picturing that in your head, good for you, dude.
Yeah.
That's just important. I mean, it really is. You can literally look yourself into the point where you get rid of the nerves and you know.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to like just keep, like you were saying, Nathan, like keep practicing and keep building that muscle memory because of the fact that like this is really honestly the first time in my life where I've comfortably been able to set boundaries. I used to be very rigid and like I used to really honestly be a bitch. Like I would cuss people out and tell them to fuck off a lot of times. And now I'm in this state where I want to be able to be assertive and not be aggressive. And I've never done that before in my life. And so it's really, really hard because each time feels like it's just going to be all out war. Because I mean, there's been times very recently where I've set a strict boundary and it's just been completely thrown out the window and somebody's made a huge deal of it. And so those moments, though, like when you're setting boundaries, they're going to happen, you know, it's part of life, but they reinforce that notion that it's like on me, that it's my fault. But their reaction, and this is really, really important, their reaction to your boundary has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
You are responsible for enforcing that boundary and ensuring that if this person is consistently overstepping your boundary, that you either remove them from your life, like you make that decision, or you figure out what you want to do about it because they're consistently overstepping your boundary.
Yeah. Sometimes I had a situation like this. I would never say my parents are bad people. All right. They're not. Like they're wonderful human beings and they're nice to people they're nice to everyone they meet and they're kind. It's just everyone has some things that you don't see.
Yeah. And and nobody's perfect, you know, people have their shit.
And I was able to open up with them and be like, look, I get aggressive sometimes when I'm talking about what I need because I felt like they've been neglected. Mm-hmm. And I was terrified to tell them that. I was absolutely terrified.
Especially
I wasn't
when
making
it's
eye
like-
contact. But I explained to them, I suddenly started getting aggressive, expressing one of my needs, right? Then I explained to them, listen, I get aggressive just because I have experience and trauma with not being listened to, and they listened to me, and they worked to help meet my need. Sometimes communicating
Yeah, that's very
with
profound.
the person,
Yeah.
it being clear about how you feel and why is what it can take. Now, if you were to open up and be vulnerable like that with somebody, and they throw it in your face, and that's a completely different situation where
Yeah.
you're going to have to take a different approach. I'm lucky enough that my parents listened to me and understood.
Yeah.
You know,
Because I come from a situation in which, like, it was like I would vocalize my need and it would be shunned and then thrown back in my face weeks, months, sometimes even full calendar years later, that, like, I realized really early on, and I'm sure that this is how, I'm not alone in my struggle, that, like, I learned very early on that it's not like people aren't safe to express your needs to. I'm going to have to be the one to meet my own needs and to make sure that my own needs are met because nobody else is going to do that for me, which then led me to, being a perfectionist.
Imagine your brain trying to figure that out, because literally your entire life, if you vocalized what your needs were, you had them met. All you could do is scream for a long time, but that was vocalizing your needs and they were met. And then when you actually progress to the point where you can use your words and you think you're communicating them and you're not getting them met, your brain's like, what happened? This should be even better than it was before. When all I could do was lay on the ground and scream. This is not right.
Yeah, which is a lot of the times why, like, especially children will act out like they tell you in a lot of different trauma trainings that every behavior, there is a need, an implicit need behind every behavior, especially in children. If they're screaming, they're fighting, they're throwing things, they're, quote unquote, overreacting. They're having these big emotions and they're having needs that need to be met. So shunning them or punishing them for those needs is actually counterproductive. Really, sometimes it's good to let them work through the emotion or sit with them while they're feeling the emotion and really ask them, well, what are you feeling? How can you move through this? Things that, oftentimes none of us really experienced when we were kids. Therefore, it's really difficult to know what we need, especially in terms of boundaries, especially in terms of knowing which boundaries are being violated and when, because oftentimes, we were told, sit down, shut up, be quiet, get over it.
Yeah, and then you start to tell that to yourself, which makes it really hard to assert yourself.
Yep. Or you build up, like me, you build up this trauma response, to any type of circumstance, and that because it reminds you back to your developmental years where you were experiencing that. So then you're just kind of re-experiencing the trauma every single time you try to set a boundary.
Oh shit, I'm sorry I forgot this. Dude, you in particular have done so much hard work.
Yeah,
especially
facts.
with your parents. I could not be more proud of you, dude.
Thanks,
we've been
guys.
talking about this for years, man. And you fucking nailed it. And that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really great
I
that you
learned
were
to
able
assert
to
myself.
Yeah, you were able to vocalize your needs and then your needs were able to be met. Was that really healing for you?
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I'm feeling a lot more zened out and positive these
Dude,
days.
you look
Yeah.
great. I mean, when you walked in,
Thanks.
I was like, yeah, good. Yeah,
Hey,
you look
hey,
good.
hey. I feel good. Way better than the last time. I moved away, came back, and they respect me a lot more now. I feel
Sometimes
that.
that's what it takes is space.
The space definitely helped, but what really helped was me communicating and asserting my needs without being too aggressive. That was huge for me, and hence the story I shared earlier. But basically,
Hence why we're talking about boundaries.
hence why we're talking about boundaries. And I do have, on that note, I will say,
I'm a badass.
A particular boundary of mine that's been breached is
Oh wait, let me finish then. And you, my
What'd you
friend,
say?
work more on yourself and your shit than pretty much anybody I know, maybe with one or two exceptions. And I really felt kind of bad when we were talking and listening to you guys for real, because you guys have really made a lot of progress in the last few years, and
I'm proud of us. Fist bump. Let's do it.
I just,
going.
Hell yeah.
you know, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm letting the team down some.
Letting the team down.
Yeah, so I'm gonna learn how to juggle.
There you go.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, it's
You're
a
the
long
comic relief.
right. It's
Okay,
a long,
we're good.
It's a long process though. Like I have not made as much progress in the boundary department as I would have liked to, but it's also a very recent development for me. So
I hear you.
Right, it's like hey, I didn't know that was an option.
Then
Yeah,
maybe this
literally.
worksheet we're gonna do
I thought they
here
only came in
can.
one size. Sorry.
facts.
Maybe the worksheet we're gonna do at the end of this session can help everybody out, including us. Anybody out there who has experience with boundaries being breached?
Bro, I have no problem
Raise your
saying
hand.
this, and I tell
your hand.
I tell everybody when I do a class, every time I teach a class, it's because I need it.
It really. I hear
need the
that.
input of a bunch of people as we go through it for 10 weeks.
Oh
It
yeah.
did make me
Just
realize
'cause-
though, when you were going through the list of like the specific boundaries, which is something that's covered early on in the boundaries workbook that I did
Mm-hmm.
that I conveniently forgot about, that like there's so many different aspects to boundaries, and that
Yeah.
wow, a lot of different facets of these boundaries are being definitely overstepped and walked all over in my life. So that was hopefully something that the listeners as well kind of took away. Not that, I want you to have your boundaries overstepped, but hopefully you found some solace in the fact that, you can have a better understanding of what specific boundaries are and, what's okay to be respected.
Because sometimes you really just need the words to put to
Exactly.
the situation. And if you can, that's the first step to healing, is if you can define what's been happening to you and how you can
You
change
just
it.
need the language.
Crazy thing about words is they can mean one thing that's very specific to you, and you could say them, and I could understand something completely different.
Yeah. That's why active listening is really important, which we'll talk about probably in a different
Active
episode.
listening.
David, we have to have David.
We should.
David's the best.
He's awesome.
David is super cool. I like David.
So what's this worksheet you talked about there?
Well, that's actually going to be our next step. I wanted to get into does anybody else have anything else they'd like to share before we do that?
No, I pretty much just trauma dumped on the microphone, so I'm good.
That's why we're here. I just wanted to share the material boundaries. It's not really money and possession thing, but I have to learn how to, one things with my ADHD or whatever it is that's going on up here that I'm figuring out is that I get overwhelmed by stuff. And I feel I need a purpose for my stuff. And once I have a purpose for that stuff, I can keep my area clean and have like stuff organized. When somebody is coming into your room and organizing stuff for you without your consent, it's a breach of material boundaries. And it's something I have experience with, but it's another thing I've been able to vocalize and assert. And so just
That makes sense why I
once
would get so pissed off about that stuff when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I see that.
Like people would take my charger and not put it back, or
Yeah, like
things would be misplaced, or somebody would borrow something out of my room and not return it, or things like that. Like that's a boundary violation because you didn't get consent for that.
yeah.
And that's a big realization.
And that's an interesting one because it's an easy one to see, and you see it in all your close relationships at some point.
No,
And
exactly.
you're like, okay, you got that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't want to know where it comes from.
Hello again. So it was at this point that we sat down and did the worksheet that's at the end of the PDF that you can get at the link in the description below. I decided to exclude it because we are all entitled to our own privacy in doing this exercise. Be sure to check the link down below if doing this worksheet sounds interesting, and then maybe print it out and give it a shot after the podcast. Now we're going to pick the conversation back up at the moment we were done with the sheet.
Okay, well, I'm going to honor my time boundary
Yeah,
with this
good for
one
you.
and
Yep.
say that I need to skedaddle.
All right, sounds good. And you heard it right there.
Look at me.
We gotta peace out,
Proud of
everybody.
I didn't even have a panic attack about it.
Thank you for asserting yourself
Of
and being
course.
so like not super aggressive about it as well. Like,
Yeah, I
look
try
at
my
that.
best. Because I know you guys are safe people, though. It's easy to do with safe people.
Hey, you know what? Thank you for saying that. This is
hear
really
you.
weird. But you know me for a while. For some reason, when we were talking, I was looking at you, and I like to look people in their eyes when I'm talking to them. And I thought, I've known you for a little bit. You're like one of very few people that I would be comfortable with in any situation.
Same.
Because we have boundaries that are incredibly rigid. I mean,
but in a healthy way.
in a very healthy way.
Yeah.
But no discussion, no interpretation.
No BS.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we did a great job up front, like at the very beginning of our work relationship, of maintaining those boundaries and setting them and knowing they exist. And
You know what?
Hell yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I
Yeah.
got goosebumps because what you just said was I set a boundary and didn't fuck it up.
Yeah,
That's pretty
we both
cool.
did.
Yay!
Look at us.
That's pretty
Hell
cool.
yeah.
Wow.
And you know what's crazy? Anybody else would have high-fived in that situation? You may have even thought about it. My brain went, we don't touch her.
Everybody,
Exactly.
feel free to write down a boundary you're happy you set, and have a great freaking week. 2 weeks. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll
fun.
see you soon.
Get on your feet,
Do we have to stand up?
on your feet, make it happen. Parks and Rec.
And that's a wrap on episode 2 of In Our Issues. Once again, very proud of how this one turned out. I really learned just how heavy of a topic boundaries can be when I recorded this episode with my co-hosts. Communication really is key. A skeleton key. That shit is important. Good luck to all the homies listening that may have just realized that they've got some work to do on asserting themselves and understanding boundaries. I know I'm right there with you. We can do this together. Podcast production work by me, original music composed and produced by me. I'm Nathan Donnelly, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Don't forget you're awesome. Peace out.